Antayin lang natin sila guys na habang sineset up ko tong presentation ko. Then, pwede na tayong mag-start.
Yes, sir.
Sige. I think, yes, pwede na tayong mag-start. Wait lang. So, pasensya na, I'm going to turn off my camera para maganda yung reception natin. Kasi nagkakaroon tayo ng technical problem sa signal. Especially ngayong oras. Pag ngayong oras, mahina ang internet dito sa amin. Anyway, I will be recording the... Hello? Ayun, so nagsasalita ako nang walang kausap. Okay guys, so pwede na tayo mag-start. Then, I think, ilan na ba? Marami nang naka-join. By the way, we will be recording the proceedings of this lecture para nang sa ganoon for those who cannot be able to attend this synchronous lecture, as well as those having signal like me na nagkakaroon ng problema sa signal pag ganitong oras is meron tayong babalikan. Okay? So, yan. I think we can start, okay? So basically, we're going to be talking about human rights, education, and we had a brief overview already with regards to the subject matter. Last meeting, nagkaroon na tayo ng overview on the things that we will be covering on this under this subject matter, okay? It just happened pala, this is the funny part before I will start, na I was discussing kasi yung therapeutic modalities while back, and it happens that the first topic that we will be covering under therapeutic modalities regarding human rights education. So, the same presentation I'm going to use to present to you on the subject matter, kasi ito human rights education, yung kanina therapeutic modalities, but they just happen to have the same topic covered, no, as part of the introduction. Okay, so that would be the basis of the lecture that we will be conducting today. So first thing first, I think we discussed this last meeting. We had a brief overview with regards to the general nature and definition of human rights, no? So, ang definition natin for human rights is that these are the different rights that are inherent in our nature and without which we cannot live as a human being without these basic rights that we have, no? So, one thing first, no? Sabi nga natin is human rights doon sa discussion natin last meeting. Human rights are the rights that are accorded to us because merely due to the fact that we are a human being. Ibig sabihin ay ito yung mga karapatan na meron tayo dahil tayo ay isang tao. So that involves the fundamental rights, right to life, no? Right to be protected of the dignity, right to own properties, and other similar rights. Okay, so it allows us to have these different rights to develop and use our human qualities, intelligence, talents, and conscience, and to satisfy our spiritual and other needs. Now, these rights are considered as inherent and inalienable rights. No? So we have rights to life, dignity, self-development, and the essence of these rights makes us human beings. So that's the very concept of human rights. Rights that are accorded to us because we are human being, and these rights makes us human. No? Itong mga karapatan na ito ay ang mga kumbaga is nagpapatibay na tayo ay isang tao. Okay? Without this, we must remember that without this, I don't think we are different from an animal. So, ibig sabihin, kung wala tayong mga karapatan na ito, especially right to life. Especially right to life. If we don't have the right to life, imagine what is the value of human being and how are we distinguished or how are we different from animals. No? Isipin nyo yun guys na kung saan, di ba, right to life protects us against any form of abuses and increases the value of human being. Kasi nga, kumbaga, ginagawa niyang napakahalaga ng buhay ng tao na kung saan is hindi siya pwedeng basta-basta kunin na lang sa'yo ng ganun-ganun na lamang. So, kumbaga, para kung wala, alisin mo yung karapatang pantao natin, no? Para lang tayong mga hayop diyan na pwedeng pagsamantalahan, pwedeng saktan, no, or pwedeng itaboy-taboy lang ng kahit sino, no? So if we don't have the right human rights, remove the right to life, remove the right to property, hindi tayo magkakaroon ng treatment as we are receiving now, ano? So kumbaga, kung ako, meron akong malaking sasakyan at sinagasaan lang kita diyan na pisa ka na parang pusa lang sa daan or parang aso lang sa daan, ganyan ang value natin as a human being if we are going to remove the human rights, no, that we have now. Okay? So make sure that you value the human rights as you value make sure that you value your life as you value the human rights of others also. Okay? So, these rights have the basic characteristic. Now, ano nga ba yung mga characteristic of human rights? We only discussed 2 last meeting. No? Dalawa lang yung diniscuss natin such as the inalienable. That's one. And the characteristic of universality. But luckily, we have now more than that. So there's a lot more of the characteristic of human rights. I do believe it's not only this. Marami pa yan depending on the reference that we will be using. But then we are going to discuss the 7 characteristic of human rights. Number 1, inherent. Human rights is considered as inherent. No? Inherent, which means that it is present not only at birth but at the early conception. Habang pinagbubuntis ka pa lang, you are accorded already of your human rights, no? Ito nga yung debate, 'di ba? Sabi natin noong sa discussion natin. Ito yung isa sa pinagdedebatihan nila kadalasan. Kailan ba natin masasabi ng isang bagay ay isang tao na, no? That is in reference to the conception. Ibig sabihin, that is in reference doon sa pagbubuntis pa lamang. Kailan natin masasabi na yung fetus sa sinapupunan is tao na, no? So that is a very debatable question. Okay? Basically, merong mga references na magsasabi dyan that masasabi lang nating tao yung isang fetus na yan kapag kaya niya nang masustain yung buhay niya without being connected to the mother and without being connected to some apparatuses, no? So ibig sabihin, pag nailabas yan is kaya niya nang mabuhay mag-isa na hindi nilalagay sa incubator, hindi sinasaksakan or hindi nilalagyan ng oxygen or hindi nakadikit sa oxygen tank and whatsoever. So ganun yung conception nila para sabihin na yung isang fetus is tao na at deserve niya nang mabigyan ng human rights. But of course, our law views it differently. Kasi if that's the case, then a case of abortion for 1 month, no, kung ang isang mother nagpa-abort habang siya ay 1 month pregnant pa lamang, should not be punishable. Kasi number 1, if they don't consider a fetus which is 1 month old dun sa sinapupunan as human being, then therefore, there should be no crime that has been committed. But that's not the case, no? Hindi yan yung kaso natin. Remember that regardless of ilang buwan ng pagbubuntis yan, as long as merong nabuo at merong pinalaglag, that is already considered as crime of abortion in our country. Therefore, it makes us conclude that regardless of how many months na yung fetus na yan, as long as meron ng nabuo, it is already a human being that deserves to be protected and that deserves to be accorded of the human rights, basically the fundamental rights to life. Okay? So that is how we view it, na kung saan doon pa lamang sa sinapupunan ay meron ng human rights, meron ng human being at he is already entitled of his human rights. Okay? It's not granted by any person. Hindi yan binibigay ng kahit sino man. Like for example, hindi yan binibigay ng pare, hindi yan binibigay ng mga leaders natin, but it's literally given to you as long as, or the mere fact that you are a human being, no? Pagka buo mo pa lang, ikaw ay entitled na of your human rights. That makes it an inherent rights, no? From womb to tomb. Kumbaga, you have your rights. Okay? Then, number 2, fundamental. Basic human rights, or the basic characteristic of human rights, number 2 is fundamental. It's a fundamental rights. Without them, life and dignity of man will be meaningless. Diba? Sabi ko kanina, without human rights, what will be your value as a human being? I think that's the second question that I will be asking you. No? Pag-isipan nyo na ngayon. Later on, that would be your activity for today. What is your value, no? If you don't have, or what is your value as a human being if you don't have human rights? I don't want to go further on that because that would be your assignment. No? Research or write an essay discussing your value without your human rights. Okay? So, yan, bibigay kong activity sa inyo. Let's proceed to number 3. No? Number 3, inalienable. Okay? We discussed this already on the previous discussion. Diba? Human rights cannot be rightfully taken away from a free individual. No? Hindi yan pwedeng kunin sa'yo. If you are an individual, ito yung notion nila, from a free individual. So, sino ang pwedeng kuhanan ng kanyang human rights? Sino ang pwedeng mawalan ng kanyang human rights? No? So, there are tendencies, or there are, of course, we have tinatawag nating juridic, how do we call this? Judicial way of revoking, no, or forfeiting your human rights. Meron tayo niyan, ano? The freedom kasi is a form of social contract, no? You have the freedom as long as you don't violate others' freedom. You have the right to exercise your right as long as you are not stepping into some else right. No? So meron kang karapatan gawin ang gusto mong gawin basta't wala kang inaapakang karapatan ng ibang tao. But if you started stepping into others' right, if you started violating some others' right, then definitely your rights can be taken away from you through judicial process. Anong ibig sabihin nun? No? Ang batas kasi natin ay nagsiserve yan as social contract. Ibig sabihin, kontrata natin yan bilang mamamayan. Ang batas natin ay proprotektahan tayo in any form of abuses, in any form of maltreatment, no? Or any form of anti-human rights act, no? Any act na pwedeng mag-violate sa ating mga karapatan bilang tao. Yan ang purpose ng batas natin. Pinoprotektahan tayo niyan. As long as we obey to the different laws that we have. Sundin natin kung ano yung sinasabi ng batas para nang sa ganun, protektahan tayo ng batas. But if we started violating the provisions of the different laws that we have, then expect that the law will go against us. Magiging kalaban tayo ng batas. So that is when nagkakaroon tayo ng tinatawag nating forfeition of rights. Okay? So kapag ang nangyari dyan is you committed a crime, then some of your rights will be forfeited from you. Like for example, your freedom of abode, your freedom of movement, and some else, na kung saan nawawala kapag ikaw ay kinulong. So it is legal for the state, or it is justifiable for the state to imprison a certain person if he is already considered as a violator of other human rights. If he is already committing crime and so on. That's the only way that they can be able to take away your rights, your rights now as a human being now if you are already a problem to the society now. But nevertheless, it is inalienable. It cannot be taken away from you unless, no, doon sa circumstances na sinabi natin kanina, wherein you started violating someone's right, you started violating the different law, and so on. So doon lamang magkakaroon tayo ng taking of your fundamental rights, but not necessarily your fundamental right to live, no? Ito ang pinagkakatalo natin minsan dito, no, with regards to death penalty, 'di ba? Kasi basically, when we talk about death penalty, that's taking away the going back to death penalty. And death penalty kasing pinag-uusapan natin dito when we are referring to forfeition of human rights. We don't have issues with regards to the other things like imprisonment. We don't have issues to that kasi it's both beneficial to the society and to the person who is being imprisoned kasi nagkakaroon siya ng time na kung pag-isip-isipan yung mga pinaggagawa niya, no? And since the purpose of the purpose of imprisonment nowadays is no longer a form of punishment but rather a rehabilitation, ano? So we don't have problem with that. We have a problem with regards to death penalty, ano? Pagdating sa death penalty, dito tayo nagkakaroon ng talo-talo, no? Kasi some would believe that it's okay to take away the life of other if he is already a problem to the society, to the community, ano? Kapag problema na yan sa lipunan, salot na yan sa lipunan kasi wala nang ibang ginawa kundi mag-commit ng crime, mang-abuso, no? Pagsamantalahan ang iba, no? Or marami na rin siyang pinapatay. Diyan tayo nagkakaroon ng division of the house, kumbaga, kung it is rightful nga ba to take away the life of others or not, no? Kung rightful nga ba na i-subject natin yan into death penalty or we still adapt onto the concept of death penalty as a capital punishment. But if we're going to look into the concept of human rights, there is no way for us to do that, and we can never ever do that if we really do respect the human rights of others. Now, we do believe that maybe death penalty is a good deterrence. That's one of the main reason kung bakit talaga nila pinupush na magkaroon or bring back death penalty in our country in order to deter the criminals in committing crime. However, a lot of studies has been conducted already that disproves the fact that it is a good deterrence. So, by respecting or by the in relation to our view to human rights, I don't think that that should be the best thing that we should do. No? Remember that we are no longer on a barbaric era and we are on a positivist era wherein all of the things are guided by scientific inquiries, and if there's no proven fact that indeed criminality would be reduced by such imposition of death penalty, then we should not adapt to it. Okay? Okay, so next is we have here imprescriptible, which literally means that human rights will not expire no matter you are using it or not. No? It cannot be lost even if man fails to use or assert them even by a long passage of time. So our human rights will not expire. No? Hindi siya gaya ng ibang mga natin na kung saan is pag hindi mo ginagamit, na naglalapse, na-expire. No? Even crime expires. No? Ang krimen sa atin nag-expire. Our human rights do not. Regardless if you are exercising your rights or you are using your rights, it will not expire. Na hindi yan nawawala. Halimbawa, ang isang tao nakulong ng 40 years, then after that, nakalabas na siya after, let's say, 40 years nga. No? Nakalabas siya after 40 years, all of his rights, civil, political, will be restored. No? Mare-restore na siya. May ibabalik sa kanya. It does not mean na kahit na 40 years niyang hindi ginamit yung kanyang human rights, it is no longer usable. No? Hindi ganon. The fact of human rights is that it will remain, no, from womb to tomb, sabi nga, no? Mananatili ang ating human rights whether we are using it or not, no, from womb to tomb, pag sa sinapupunan hanggang tayo ay mamatay na, no? Pag namatay ka na, hindi ka na human being, so your rights as a human is already forfeited, removed. Your civil rights are no longer there. No? So that's basically the concept of that. Imprescriptible. No, it will not expire, it will not lose, no matter you are using it or not for even in a very long time. Next is we have here indivisible. No? Human rights is indivisible. It's not capable of being divided. Hindi pwedeng papiliin ka lang kung anong gusto mong gamitin rights mo, no? Papiliin ka lang kung halimbawa is nagamit mo na yung ganitong rights mo, you are no longer use this, no? Or mamili ka anong gusto mo, right to property or right to life. Now you are entitled of all of those rights and it cannot be given in that way, no? Kung ano ang tinatamasa ni Pedro, no? Kung ano ang karapatan na binigay kay Pedro, yun din ang karapatan na tatamasahin ni Juan, no? Kung si Pedro na mayaman ay merong karapatan ganito, no? Si Pedro na mahirap ay meron ding karapatan kaparehas kay Pedro. That should be, no? Yun dapat ang mangyari. Okay? Ganon dapat ang maging treatment. Regardless of who you are, no, you should enjoy the same rights of being enjoyed by everybody else. No? Kung dapat or kung ano ang tinatamasang karapatan ng iba, dapat yun din ang tamasahin mo ang karapatan. No? Kasi sabi nga natin, rights are accorded or human rights are accorded to all human being. Okay? Yan. Indivisible, na hindi pwedeng hati-hatiin, hindi pwedeng partial ang pagbigay ng human rights. Buong-buo yan. Next is universal. Ayan, actually pinag-usapan na natin to, no? That human rights is universal. It applies irrespective of one's origin, status, or condition or place where one lives, no? The rights can be enforced without national border. So whatever we are receiving, human rights we are receiving as a Filipinos, no, should be the same to the human rights they are receiving in other countries such as the United States and so on. Hindi pwedeng ang nakikinabang lang sa human rights ay mga Amerikano, no? Habang ang mga Afrikano ay walang pinapakinabangang human rights. Hindi ganoon, no? Whatever human rights is accorded to American citizens should be also accorded to everyone. No? Kung anong tinatamasa din natin bilang Pilipino, no, anong karapatan natin bilang Pilipino, the same din ang karapatan ng bawat isa, no, bawat tao sa mundo. That's the concept of universality of human rights. Walang mataas, walang mababa, no? Basta tao ka, you deserve human rights. Hindi pwedeng bawal or hindi pwedeng bawal pumatay kapag ikaw ay puti, pero pag itim ang pinatay mo, okay lang. Hindi ganoon. Now, we are already done with those types of mindset. And we are already done with those types of arrangement in terms of human rights. Hindi pwedeng Kristiyano ka, na okay lang na patayin ka, pero pag Muslim ka, hindi pwedeng patayin ka ng basta-basta na lang. That's not the case. Wala na tayo doon, ano? So, whatever is being applied to someone, no, should be applied to all regardless of their status, no, regardless of their origin, kung saan sila galing, regardless of the condition of their places, no, kung saan sila bansa nakatira, no, at kung saan sila naroon, no. Rights should be enforced without national border, irrespective of your ethnic, culture, religion, and other social distribution. Okay, so it should be universal. Okay. Next is rights or human rights is interdependent, which means that the fulfillment of or exercise of one cannot be had without the realization of the other. So they should not be they should be interdependent, which means that whatever is applied, no? I mean, yung mga rights na mga yan should have the interconnection with each other, and they should uh, do or they should function also as a whole, no? Hindi rin naman pwede that if one of your rights is taken away from you, no, as a result, the other will be taken away from you. Okay, so dapat the different rights that they have could exist, no, uh, interdependently. Okay, then we have here the different principle of human rights. I mean the human rights principle. No? Sabi dito, the dignity of man and human life is inviolable. No? From the dignity of man is derived the right of every person to free development of his personality. A legitimate state should exist to assure that in charge or in the discharge of the governmental functions, the dignity that is bright right of every human being is duly safeguarded, which is definitely true. Now, but I have a concern with regards to this. Now, it's worth looking into it. The government exists, no? Ang government natin usually exists, no? And it's one of its function is the protection of the human rights of its citizen, di ba? Ang purpose or ang one of the reason why government exists is that it overlooks the welfare, no? Tinitignan niya kung ano yung makabubuti para sa mga citizens niya nang nasasakupan niya, no? So included to that is the protection of human rights. Government has the obligation to see to it that human rights are not violated, that human rights are not abused, and that human rights is being respected. So that's one of the what we can consider as the function of the government. However, there are cases wherein it's the government who is the major violator of human rights. May cases tayo na kung saan ang karamihan na nagko-commit or nag-violate ng mga tinatawag nating human rights violation or the state itself, which ought to preserve or protect the human rights of others. That can be observed in the history, meron tayong mga ganyan na kung saan is instead that the government will be the protector of the human rights of its citizen, it makes them more the violator, and that should not be the case. Hindi dapat ganon. But we must remember also that it's not only the government who can be a violator of human rights. It can be a private group, private individual. Remember that if you kill a certain person without justification or illegally, then definitely you are already violating. You did not just committed a crime, but you also violated the human rights of that person. Okay? So anyone can be a human rights violator as long as they are disrespecting or disregarding the human rights of their company or other individuals, So yan yung tignan natin dapat. Okay, so a brief history with regards to the human rights. And the human rights are not inherently recognized, During the early days, they don't have the concept of human rights, although some of them already are doing or practicing yung pag-respect ng human rights natin, but they don't have its concept. Some practice it, but they are not aware that what they are doing is really respecting human rights. But if you can remember, our history shows that we are a barbaric person, human beings, and we really are barbaric human beings during the day, war or committed for majority of the reason, like for example agawan ng teritoryo, that can be settled through war, killing each other, no? Agawan sa asawa, no? Pwedeng may settle yan ng uh, trial by ordeals such as combat, no, and whatsoever. So we are really, they don't really have the respect to human rights before, no? They have the respect for human being, but it's treated differently as it is now, no? Kung meron silang pagrespeto siguro sa mga mayayaman lang, no? But for the slaves, no, for example, the slaves, no, they don't have the human rights even if they are a human being, because just because they are part of the lower part of the society, no? Kasi they really do, no? They really do have yung mga tinatawag nating social discrimination, no? Porque mahirap or mayaman, magiging depende dyan ang trato sa'yo. No, siguro nire-respeto ka bilang isang tao at yung karapatan mo bilang tao kapag ikaw ay nasa upper strata, no, kapag ikaw ay nasa mataas na katungkulan society, but pag ikaw ay nasa baba, then you are treated no different from animals, no? So that's basically how they perceive human rights before. Although sabi natin they don't have human rights is not really recognized, but rather pwede natin sabihin the social rights is being recognized before, no? Ang karapatan mo nakadepende kung anong posisyon mo sa society. Fundamental rights, nagkaroon na tayo ng view on fundamental rights on 17th century, no, by English philosopher John Locke when he discusses yung mga tinatawag nating natural rights such as yung mga tinatawag nating right to life, right to liberty, and right to property. So we had discussed this last meeting already. Yan. So fundamental rights, o yung mga tinatawag nating basic rights were discussed or were taken into consideration during the 17th century by philosopher or English philosopher John Locke. No? So at least they're viewing already yung essentials or significance of the right to life, right to liberty, and right to property as the fundamental rights that they have before. Okay? Now, part of the history is the development of yung tinatawag nating civil rights. No? Civil rights is your rights as a citizen in a certain country. No? To further protect the fundamental rights of every subject, the concept of civil rights was developed. No? And when we're talking about civil rights, these are a class of rights that protects individuals, the freedom from infringement by the government. Literally, ito yung mga violation nating nakikita, no? The existence of government violation on the human rights, specifically civil rights of a certain individual. No? Social organization, private individuals, no, yan yung mga common violators of the civil rights of each and every individual. It ensures that people, no, physical and mental integrity and life and safety, as well as the protection from discrimination on grounds of social group, no, equality, we're talking about equality and others, no, because before there are a lot of gender-based abuses, no, race abuses, no, abuses by virtue of sexual orientation, no, racism, no, let's talk about nationality, color, and especially color, no. We know for a fact that before yung discrimination nangyayari sa United States between white and the black American, no, discrimination by age, discrimination by political affiliation, no, discrimination by ethnicity, discrimination by social class, which is very common, no, discrimination by religion, no, sometimes discrimination by disability, and other individual rights such as right to privacy, freedom of thought, speech, press, assembly, and movement. So all of this are already being viewed as a legitimate rights for an individual. Na etong mga to don't exist, no, kung nandun tayo sa tinatawag nating dictatorship. You don't have basically majority of your civil rights are cancelled or forfeited when you are living in a dictatorship types of government wherein they don't view or they don't believe in the concept of civil rights, and literally all of the rights are being controlled by the uh, government itself. No? So if you're going to look at North Korea, no? So if you're going to look at North Korea, do you think that civil rights exist in North Korea? I don't think so. No, I don't think so. The government does not respect its citizen in terms of their civil rights. No, wala, it doesn't exist. Whatever the government says, no, and that should be the rule. No, yun dapat ang ma-follow. So that's how you will live in a country, or in a country where civil rights is not respected. Now, that's before. Now, we are very lucky, of course, that we have the civil rights. We are enjoying the civil rights that we have. So, we can definitely act as you wanted to act. Now, we have the freedom. Now, we have the freedom to join whatever religion we wanted to do, to join into. No, we have the freedom to move, no, express ourselves regardless of our sex or our race or our sexual orientation and so on. In the workplace, of course, in the workplace, then wala na yung mga tinatawag nating discrimination by sexual orientation, wherein siguro lalaki lang ang pwedeng magtrabaho, na lalaki lang ang pwedeng mag-aral and so on. So civil rights really redefine as a community. No, when these civil rights are not present, there's a lot of violations, and human are less human before without their civil rights. No, maybe you don't value the importance of civil rights right now, but when it will be taken away from you, then definitely that's the time that you will realize that civil rights is very important. Okay, yeah. Next is we have political rights. Yan. What about political rights? Political rights includes the natural justice in law, no, such as the rights of the accused, no, the right for fair trial, the right to due process, no, the right to seek redress or legal remedy against any violations of the law, no, that is accorded against you, the rights to participate in civil society and politics, no, the right to have or to join into different association, the right to assemble, right to petition, right of self-defense, and lastly the right to vote, which is very important. No, the political rights did not existed during the early days. No, bilang isang ordinaryong mamamayan, you don't have the word or you don't have the authority to speak up, especially with regards to political matters. Before, even women don't have the right to vote before, and much more to participate in an election. No? Wala silang karapatan na tumakbo sa isang halalan before. Wala silang karapatang bumoto. No? And for due process, for example, no? Due process does not exist before. No? When you're accused, wala yung tinatawag nating innocent until proven guilty. Basta inakusahan ka, tinuro ka, and you do not belong to the middle class or upper class, then definitely you will be sentenced immediately. Diba? Parusahan ka na, sentensyahan ka na agad, or bitayin ka na agad kapag ikaw ay tinuro na ikaw ay nag-commit ng crime, lalo na kung ikaw ay nasa mababang baitan lamang ng ating lipunan. So, political rights, due process, justice don't exist before for the lower class. No? It definitely exists for those who are member of middle class, no, and upper class. We had observed this already, no, during the Spanish invasion. Kung mapansin nyo, during the Spanish invasion, ang daming violation of political rights, civil rights, human rights. No? Dinayo, sinakop tayo ng mga Espanyol, no? And we are treated as less human. maybe no different from that of the animals, na kung saan we are treated as slave and we are not accorded of our rights as a human being before, no? So that is the life that we will have if we don't have the political rights, if we don't have the civil rights, if we don't have the human rights respected to us, no? So yun ang pwedeng mangyari. That's why sabi ko nga, we should value our rights, no? As long as we have them now. Ano ba yung mga nandyan? Yan, due process. How important is due process in our life as a human being? No? Gaano kahalaga na meron tayong due process? Of course, it makes us more human. Kasi kapag ikaw ay sinampahan ng kaso, hindi agad-agad ikaw ay ikukulong, kundi magkakaroon pa ng investigation, which is very important in order for us to receive justice. No? You have the right to vote. I think that's very important. No? If you have the right to vote, exercise your right to vote. You have the right to petition. You have the right to complain. No? You have the right to correct or to critique whatever the government is doing, no? Especially when it is wrong. So those are your rights, political rights. You have the right to participate in these political issues, political debates, no? Because you are a human being and you are a citizen of that country, no? So yan yung mga political rights natin, and they cannot take that away from us, no? Hindi nila pwedeng alisin yan sa atin as long as we are not in violation of the different laws that we have. Okay? Then we also have here labor rights. No? By the way, kung mapansin nyo guys, no? We started from human rights, right to live, no? Right to life as a basic rights. Habang lumalaki ka, no? Yan yung tandaan mo. Habang lumalaki ka, habang nagkakaedad ka, no? Nadadagdagan yung mga karapatan mo bilang isang tao, no? Kung una, no? Sa una, you only have your tawag natin dito, right to life, no? Pangalawa, meron ka ng civil rights, no? Kapag naabot mo na yung proper age, kumbaga, na at the same time you will be receiving your political rights pag inabot mo na yung 18 years old, which will make you ang tawag natin doon, a legal person, no? A legal person already, wherein you are accorded already of your different rights, na magkakaroon ka na ng mga karapatan bilang isang mamamayan. So you will be having those rights pag abot mo ng tinatawag nating age of majority, no? You can start exercising those rights when you reach such thing. But with regards to civil rights kasi, there are some rights there that does not necessarily wait for you to become a part of the legal age before you can enjoy. Now, but that is also some of the rights that are being accorded to you when you are a human being. But pagdating dito sa tinatawag nating political rights, diyan papasok yung mga qualifications, such as you must reach a specific age, no, before you can be able to start enjoying your rights on your political rights and so on, no? But some other rights under political rights can definitely be enjoyed without reaching the age of majority, such as yung mga rights natin with regards to justice, with regards to due process, no, legal remedy, no. But for yung mga right pagdating sa mga vote, no, pagdating sa mga right to vote and so on, right to petition and so on, then yun ay may enjoy lang natin pag naabot na natin yung age of age of majority or legal age. Okay? Now, kapag ikaw naman ay nagtatrabaho na, ayan, madadagdagan na naman ang yung rights. Now, this is still part of the human rights, and that's not because it's labor rights is no longer part of human rights. It's part of human rights. Actually, this is one of the rights that they had focused upon in the United Nations Convention on Human Rights. Now, isa ito sa mga tinalakay nila kasi bakit tayo nag-come up ng labor rights na tinatawag? That is because of the issues on slavery na yung pang-aalipin, pang-aalila before. Wherein yung mga, sabi ko nga, yung less fortunate, yung mga member of the lower strata, na yung mga member ng yung sa laylayan ng lipunan ba na tinatawag natin, are not treated fairly, especially in terms of labor, no? 'Di ba? Nagtatrabaho sila, hindi sila pinapasweldo, hindi sila pinapakain, kumbaga alipin ang tingin sa kanila. So, in response to those issues that we have, they have now developed the concept of labor rights na tinatawag. So, labor rights covers a large array of rights listed on human rights, no? And kasali dito yung mga right to decent work, no? Freedom of association, equal opportunity and protection against discrimination, especially those discrimination that are transpiring in the workplace. No? Now workers' rights are laid out in number of human rights convention. So we have here some of the rights that was specified in the United or Universal Declaration on Human Rights, no, that was convened. So we have here the right to be employed, no, regardless of your social background as long as you are qualified. No, karapatan nating makapaghanap ng trabaho or makapasok or makuha sa isang trabaho. We also have the right to have a favorable work condition, especially in our payment, yung remuneration na tinatawag. So, this is all in response to the slavery that is very common during the early days, ano? Kasi before is trabaho lang. Trabaho lang sila ng trabaho without considering kung okay ba yung kanilang work condition, okay ba yung kanilang situation, especially in terms of their salary. They don't even have salary before, no? Kumbaga, ano lang sila, tagapagsilbi. Ang bayad nila ay kung ano yung pinapakain sa kanila, parang ganun ba? Or di kaya naman is parang utang nila yung buhay nila sa mga taong yan, kaya sila ay nagsisilbi without being paid, no? Another is the right to safe and healthy working conditions. Yan, isa yan. Even in the biblical setting, makikita natin yung pag-abuse sa mga slaves doon na kung saan is, like for example in Egypt, ano? This is a classic example, no? In Egypt before, no, kung saan is inaalipin sila, pinapagawa sila ng mga pyramids and so on, without them receiving salary, no? But because they are considered a slave, no? And the government demands their participation in the building in creating those things before, no? So yan, it's a response to those instances that are happening, no? Right to have an equal opportunity on employment, no? Right to rest, leisure, and reasonable limitation of working hours. So imagine before, walang limitation of working hours, no? Today, we only have to work 8 hours a day, no? So, nagkakaroon na tayo ng progress with regards to how the workers are being treated, no, in their workforce. No? Right to form and join trade union of his choice, yan. So, before, they don't have the, yan, patago lahat ng mga trade union before, na patago lahat yan kasi bawal yan sa pinagbabawal ng mga company. Pag may mga ganyan, tinatanggal sa trabaho, pinaparusahan, pinapakulong. But right now, no, I think it is respected already. If you wanted to join a labor union, then definitely you can join if you wish. Okay? So those are some of the labor rights. Of course, in our country, we have much more onto that, no? That is being presented by the Department of Labor and Employment, no? And other agencies concerned with the labor rights of each and every individual. OFWs are also entitled for this, ano? Kasi sila kumbaga yung mga lumalabas sa bansa, no? And sometimes there's some abuses na nangyayari. And luckily we have these different catalogs here of different rights, no? That always governs, no? Or protect our fellow Filipino who are working abroad, no? So those are the importance of such rights. Now let's look into the classification of rights. We have here the different classification of rights: natural rights, constitutional rights, and statutory rights. No? Pag sinabi nating natural rights, no, yan yung pinag-usapan natin kanina, the American or English philosopher John Locke, no? Sabi niya there should be a respect, no, to the different fundamental rights that we have, such as right to life, dignity, and property. No, sa natural rights naman we have here yung mga God-given rights na tinatawag natin. Basically, these are rights that are accorded to human being as being discussed in the biblical reference that we have. So they term it God-given rights. No? We also have here yung mga morally upright behavior, no, which are acknowledged. No? It's not kasi pag sinabi nating natural rights, we are not focusing on things that are written in the Bible. Rather, we're looking at the things that are considered as moral actions, no, moral things that we should receive as a human being, no, with or without the Bible saying so. No? So we also have the different unwritten rights, but then they are being respected as they prevail as norms in the society. Dahil yun ang nakagawian ng society na yan, na yun ang nakasanayan ng society na yan, then that's also considered as natural rights. No? For example, what are rights that are unwritten but then the society views it as a norm, such as respecting the elders. No? Elders has the right to be respected. No, but that is not written. No, that is not written. Rather, the society views it as proper and moral, no, to do such thing. That's why it's written, or it is entitled, or it's given or accorded to those individuals who are already at the specific age that we call them elders. No? So yan yung mga isa sa mga unwritten rights na pwede nating masabi. We also have constitutional rights. No? Ano naman yung constitutional rights? Constitutional rights refers to the rights conferred and protected by the Constitution. No? And we cannot be modified or taken away by law. You remember that Constitution is known to be the highest form or highest law of the land. Yan yung pinakamataas na batas sa land natin, no? Sa bansa natin. Therefore, or which means that, anong ibig sabihin yan? Kung it is the highest law of the land, that no law should be created that will go against the Constitution. No? So kung sinabi ng Constitution natin na the Constitution respects the life of each and every citizen, therefore, no law should be created that will disrespect the life of its citizen. Yan yung talo-talo natin with regards to that penalty, ano? Kasi sabi ng Constitution natin, the Constitution respects the fundamental rights of each citizen, which is the right to live, na karapatang mabuhay. Pero bakit nakalusot sa ating batas ang kaparusahan, no? O yung pagpaparusa ng kamatayan or in death penalty na tinatawag. So that's a conflict between the Constitution and the law that was created, or whichever law created the death penalty, that sentence before. No? So, yan yung dapat hindi mangyari, na magkaroon tayo ng batas na kumbaga is uma-amend doon sa provision of the Constitution. If they wanted to change the provision of the Constitution, that the right thing to do is to change the entire Constitution, or magkaroon sila ng Constitutional Commission or Constitutional Assembly. Yun yung pwede nilang gawin. Hindi sila pwedeng magpasa ng batas na kung saan pwedeng baguhin ang isang parte ng Constitution. That is not the case. no law can amend the provision of the Constitution unless it's the Constitution itself who will amend itself. No? Yan yung Constitution. And all those rights, especially the Bill of Rights, are constitutional rights nating matatawag. No? It's provided by the Constitution. That's why utmost respect should be given to those different rights. No? If there is a conflict between rights given by the Constitution and statutory rights, then definitely which will be followed? The constitutional rights. Okay? Next is we have statutory rights, or those rights which are provided by law promulgated by the lawmaking body. So anong ibig sabihin nito? These rights are considered as privilege rights. No? Which means that they are only given to a specific group upon qualification. Ano ba yung mga statutory rights? Ano ba yung pwede natin example dito? Right to possess firearm. Right to carry firearm. No, that's one of the statutory rights. Hindi lahat ng tao may karapatang magbitbit ng baril, magkaroon ng baril or whatsoever. No? Only upon qualifying, then it could be given to you. Kapag ikaw ay nag-apply, no? Kapag ikaw ay qualified na magdala ng baril, then that's the only time that rights will be accorded to you by the law. No? However, if the law decides that you are no longer qualified and the law decides that they should already take away that rights to you, then definitely you don't have anything to say about it. No? So that's statutory rights. Hindi siya automatic rights. You need to apply. No? Kailangan mong applyan at kailangan mong mag-grant ng authority to have those rights. Ano? Other examples is driver's license. No? A driver's license or the right to drive a motor vehicle. No? So, kailangan mong applyan, kailangan mong magrantan ng rights to have that, but if nagrantan ka na and the law decides that you should be taken away or that right should be taken away from you because you are a violator of the traffic rules and regulation, then they can take that away from you. So those are some of the example of statutory rights. Ano? Ang constitutional rights, you need not to apply. It's automatically given to you. Natural rights is the same. You don't need the authority or permission by anybody. Basta tao ka, you have the natural rights or the fundamental rights that everyone should have. Constitutional rights is almost the same. Na kapag ikaw ay mamamayan ng isang bansa, kapag ikaw ay pinanganak dyan sa isang bansa at you are considered as citizen, then therefore you will have all the constitutional rights you deserve. Pag statutory rights, you need to apply for it and you need to be qualified for it. Okay? Then we have here the stage of human rights. So how human rights is conceived, we have idealization, positivization, realization. So, usually, ang pag-conceptualize ng human rights start with an idea. No, nag-start yan with an idea. Ano nga ba yung idea na yan? Usually, a notion about human rights, the same. No? Paano nila na-conceive ang human rights is because of the war that are transpiring in the different countries, which diminish the value of human being. No? Imagine nyo, noong unang panahon, nung panahon ng gera, no? Okay lang pumatay ng tao, no? Basta kalaban mo. No? So, with that, nababawasan na nga ang tao, nauubos na ang tao, nade-devalue pa kumbaga yung value ng isang tao, ng human being. So, bumababa ang halaga ng tao during that time. So, they started to coming up with an idea of having these human rights. No? So, it started with the idea, no? They are reflecting into it. No? They're calculating the different pros and cons about it. Then, after that, when they are already convinced, they started presenting the idea to other countries, no? In which the other countries provided or supported the ideas. No? Yung mga nag-support dyan, no? They adopted also the concept of human rights. So that's positivization naman, na kung saan is they passed through the idea, no? Pinakita nila yung idea, present nila to other countries, the other countries agreed, the other countries supported it, no? And as a sign of support, they included it into the legal instrument or to their constitution or to their laws, no, that they have. They adapted the concept of human rights to their laws. That's already the positivization. No? Then, kapag ito ay inadapt na at inapply na doon sa citizen ng isang bansa na yan, na kung saan he supported the concept of human rights, then that is already the realization wherein the citizens are starting to benefit from the different rights that are included into the legal instrument of the country to which they live in. Okay? Nakuha natin yan? So halimbawa, si Mr. Pedro at Mr. Juan nag-uusap na kung saan sabi nila, siguro kailangan na natin gumawa ng limitation doon sa pagpatay ng tao, limitation sa pag-violate sa pang-aapi, sa pang-aalipin, and so on. Since Pedro and Juan is a very influential person, no, nagkaroon sila ng chance na i-present yung kanilang idea sa mga leaders, no? And they were able to convince the different leaders that kailangan na nilang ipatupad or gumawa ng aksyon na magre-respeto sa tinatawag nating human rights. And because of that, they were supported by different leaders of different country. Inadapt nila yung kanilang proposition, nilagay nila sa kanilang batas, at ngayon, ang ordinaryong mamamayan sa mga bansang yan ay nakikinabang na doon sa mga declarations or doon sa mga proposal or idea ni Juan at Pedro na kanilang present. And that is already yung tinatawag nating realization. Okay? So that's the stages of human rights in very simple discussion. So we have here the different sources of the human rights. Now we have the different sources here. Sa ating bansa, we have the 1987 Philippine Constitution. No? It's the source of the different Bill of Rights that we have. I do believe you discussed that during your senior high school, no? Na kung saan is included na yung 1987 Philippine Constitution sa curriculum. Okay, so 1987 Constitution talks about a lot of rights, but most specifically yung tinatawag nating Bill of Rights. No? And that Bill of Rights is definitely based doon sa International Bill of Rights that we have, no? Na kung saan in the United Nations, no, nagkaroon tayo ng proposal with regards to respecting the different rights of each and every individual, specifically political rights, no, civil rights, no, and then Magna Carta for different groups such as for women. Nagkaroon ng Magna Carta for women which talks about the different rights that should be accorded to women, no? And then for juvenile, sa mga kabataan natin, ano ba yung mga karapatan din dapat nilang tamasahin? Children, no? Labor workers, yan. What else? Yung mga PDL, person deprived of liberty, nabigyan din sila ng karapatan, no? In relation to that, nabigyan sila ng basis, catalog of the different rights that should be accorded to them due to the International Bill of Rights that was been presented into the UN Convention. Okay? As a result, nagkaroon tayo ng tinatawag na Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Now, when we talk about human rights, it's not only the right to life. It's a lot of rights ang nakalagay dyan. So that includes yung mga workers' rights, yung mga binanggit ko kanina, rights of women, no, political rights, civil rights, and many other more. Okay? So that's the end of our lecture. If you have question with regards to the things, no, tanong nyo na. Sige. Do you have questions, guys?
Saan po makukuha yung module nito, sir?
Wait lang at isasend ko na lang doon sa ano. I-transfer ko lang sa Google Drive. Then isasend ko sa inyo mamaya. Any more? Ayan. So, kung wala na guys, hindi ko meron pala akong sinabing activity kanina, maalala ko. Yan, yung number 2, no? So, punta tayo doon sa GC. GC? Gawa ako ng Google, ng Facebook group, no? Then, isasend ko doon yung activity natin. Okay? The same time, I will be sending also the recorded lecture pag naayos ko, no? Para meron tayong reference para sa mga wala ngayon. Then, attendance. Meron ako nakita kanina sa comment. Ayan. Okay na guys. So, if wala na kayong tanong, punta tayo doon sa ating Facebook group. Then, isasend ko doon yung inyong activity. Public submission ulit tayo. Okay? So, thank you guys sa pakikinig. I do hope you learned something from today's lecture. That's it for today. See you sa next nating meeting. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir.
Bye, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Bye, sir.
Thank you.
Sir.